Hello, creatives. Welcome to True Creativity Within the podcast. It is the end of September. That this month completely flew by for me. And I know this time of year, it always feels like time kind of accelerates. It goes faster, almost twice as fast, or three times as fast. And then before you know it, end of the year, right? Anyway, I hope you're doing well wherever you are, and hope you're staying safe. I know there's some parts of the country that's getting hit by hurricanes and some extreme weather, so I hope you're staying safe. So the inspiration for today's episode is the other day I was talking to a friend, and we got into this conversation about inspiration, creative inspiration. And it got me thinking more deeply about inspiration, and particularly when it comes to our creativity. So, to get started, let's just kind of break down the definition of inspiration. So, I looked up the definition of inspiration, and what came up was the Latin translation is to breathe into. It also relates to the Latin word that connects to spirit. So it's related, breath is related to spirit, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then the Greeks believed that inspiration came from the muse, from the gods, and then other religions also believed that inspiration came from the divine or the spirit. And then I came across Gnosticism. Okay, let's try that word again. Agnosticism, which I guess it's pronounced without the G, so it's Gnosticism. This religion believed that inspiration was considered the divine spark, and that this divine spark resided within all human beings. But they believed that the purpose of life was to enable the divine spark, in other words, inspiration, and that the purpose in life was to release it from captivity. And I thought that was interesting, in order to reestablish connection with the divine or with God. And they believed that divine and God was the resource of inspiration. So that got me thinking when I read this definition. That got me thinking about, well, how many times did I come across someone who said, I'm not creative, I don't have an artistic bone in my body? I've always tried to challenge that belief or that mindset, because I believe that everyone was born creative. But oftentimes that creativity is hidden, right? Or for whatever reason, we just wrote it off as I'm not creative, so they never attempt to do anything creative or artistic. That the definition of if I was creative, this would come easy, all of that stuff, right? So this idea that the divine spark is a captive in all humans and that it needs to be released was interesting, because I do believe that once you start to explore creativity, even if you've never explored it before in your entire life, and all of a sudden you come at a stage in your life where you're giving yourself permission to do something artistic, write, or do something creatively expressive, that is the beginnings of really discovering what's inside of you, which is already creativity or a divine spark. They also believe that in order to free the divine spark from its cage, the individual has to be compassionate and loving towards him or herself, and others. And that really ties into why I talk a lot about self-compassion when it comes to your creativity, not be harsh on yourself, judgmental, or self-critical of what you're creating. So that's another topic, but I just thought that was really interesting. So I'm going to go down a couple of, topics in terms of where inspiration can come from. So creative inspiration can come from accidents and mistakes. So I have always told my students in the last 10 years that I've been teaching, be open to accidents and mistakes. And the reason why I say that is if we are so afraid of making a mistake, right? Or screwing it up. That's often what I've heard is I'm afraid I'm going to screw this up. Then we're already setting ourselves up for overthinking the artwork or the creative process. We set ourselves up for disappointment. So that's why I say welcome accidents and mistakes. That's one thing. Another thing too is some of my creative magic during my creative process when I've created artwork and had some unexpected accidents happen. That is when some really interesting, cool stuff happens. And also, that is when inspiration happens. Like, I'll have an accident. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. And then I try to wipe it off, for example. So I try to wipe it off. And then it's like, and then suddenly something underneath it shows up. But it's mixed up with the other layer of paint that I'm trying to wipe off. And then all of a sudden, I have this really interesting, unexpected texture that happened. And then I'm like, well, why don't I try that again, but change it? Now, that in itself, which was an accident and a mistake, created a whole new idea around that. You know, a whole new perspective on, oh, maybe I'll try this next time, or maybe I'll try it but do this instead, you know. So that's why I think creative inspiration can come from accidents and mistakes. Dreams. Inspiration can come from dreams. There is a history of surreal artists who have often returned to their dream diaries for inspiration for their paintings. So if you were to look up surreal art, you'll see a lot of this artwork that's very dreamlike, and you know that's why they say surreal. There's really interesting things that don't happen in reality, but happen in their dreams. So sometimes, because our dreams are so bizarre and weird, and things, you know, things or people or objects or scenarios happen that would never happen in real life. Sometimes they do, but you know, sort of the science fiction stuff that happens in our dreams can also be inspiration for artwork. So so dreams are a way to even inspire an idea as well. Conversations with other creatives. I find that when I talk to other creatives or other artists about either their project or my project or what I'm doing or what they're doing, sometimes what happens is that exchange in the conversation almost starts to ignite new ideas. It opens up the space for new ideas. And this kind of reminds me of, we sometimes get so much in our own heads as creatives that we can also sort of lock ourselves into a corner. And then when we bring in fresh perspective or have a conversation with someone else about it, that can start to sort of untangle the web that we've put ourselves in, and we start to look at things very differently. So I think that's also a really good source of creative inspiration. Nature is really good, and I know for me, when I am in nature, not only, I think it's a couple things. Not only do you start to get out of your element, right? You're in nature, which automatically, I think, calms your nervous system down. And then when nature calms your nervous system down, now you're kind of letting go of all those concerns and worries that you have throughout your daily life. And nature can almost be a remedy of that, where you're free of that, which then opens up space for you to connect to creative spirit, opens up space to connect to your muse or the divine spark, or your creative spirit. right? And that's when sometimes ideas can come up. Ideas can come up sometimes when I'm just staring out at a sunset or the ocean. It just starts to clear my head. And then I feel like that's when creativity can begin to surface. So nature is really good for creative inspiration. Which leads to also, like I mentioned, getting out of your element or your routine. So, when you travel, I know for me, when I travel, when I leave my element, my routine, the comfort of my own home, right? When I go someplace else, I get inspired by being in a different surrounding, being in around different people, a different culture. And I think getting out of your element in that way can really spark up inspiration, because now you're sort of taking stimulation that is unusual for you because it's not what you are taking in on a daily routine or your daily life, but you're taking new things in. So you feel more inspired. This is the same goes for when you, and I think this is why Julia Cameron mentioned artist date, is really getting out, going to an art gallery, going to a museum, going and having an experience, immersive experience that will ignite some of that creativity, and also, I think, almost injects you with a sort of renewed energy, a creative energy. So getting out of your element and your routine can actually create inspiration. Another thing too is I think creative inspiration can come from something, from unfortunately a painful experience or a traumatic experience where art or your creation or the creative process becomes a cathartic process. So, in other words, if you feel like you're processing, maybe you're writing a novel, that's one way to process a painful experience through the characters' life experiences and conversations and story. So I think that you can pull creative inspiration from maybe a traumatic experience in your personal life and then make sense of it, whether you're writing or making art around it. So I think that sometimes we can find those gems of creative inspiration when we return back to some of those painful experiences. So, that's also, you can go the other way around where you can say, you know what, I'm going to set an intention to sort of process this situation, these feelings, these unresolved issues, and I'm going to process it through a series of artworks, or I'm going to process through writing poetry. It can be any form of creative activity, but that was your intention. So I think that can be a form of inspiration. Copying and imitating someone else's artwork. So I have told my students it's okay to copy. Now we want to be mindful of plagiarism, and I think that's what also kind of blocks us from, oh, I can't copy anybody, which is valid. But when I say it's okay to copy, it's okay to mimic or imitate an artist that you admire. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to recreate the Starry Night by Van Gogh and then I'm going to put my name on it. It's not like that. It's like I'm going to imitate it with the intention of actually learning from it. It's a form of practice. You're not actually creating a original art and claiming it as an original art by imitating someone else's art. You're learning from it. It's another thing too. It's not just learning. You're becoming comfortable with perhaps the technique as well, or it is the catalyst to explore a different medium, a different technique, a different direction, an experiment with the art materials. But that is a different intention than I'm going to copy someone else's artwork and then put my name on it, right? So I know for me that when I was in high school and I just started painting, I I imitated in my paintings a lot of other people's artwork, and it was very educational for me. It also gave me an opportunity to practice the technique as well, to practice painting and to get good at it. So that's one way of gaining some inspiration. Now, and one of the things I want to share about that topic is that I came across an experiment that was done in Tokyo. And it's interesting because what they did is one of the tests that they gave the subjects to do was to draw, like to copy by drawing another artist's work. And then they had to imitate that drawing again without copying. And what they had discovered was that after the copying directly, like, drawing directly from the artist piece, when they removed that and then did their own drawing, they actually had a different perspective. They actually sort of developed their own style from that their drawings now became uniquely their style. So, and not only that, the research also found that the subjects were less likely to overthink. They were a little bit more relaxed because now they were becoming more comfortable maybe with the drawing technique. They were a little bit more relaxed in the process, but they also offered some unique angles or unique directions on how they were going to interpret their drawings. So I thought that was really interesting. I came across that on the internet when I was doing research. So another way to gain inspiration is to dive deep into a subject that can sustain your curiosity, a subject that you feel very passionate about, very interested in, and you just can't get enough of it, right? So it's so interesting to just dive in, research it, study it, read about it, explore it. Because I feel like when you're doing that, that is cultivating inspiration for even an artwork. This is one of the reasons why some artists will do sketchbooks or workbooks, is they're doing research for potential series, a body of work, potential, even some writers are doing research for a novel or for a book. And because that topic, captured their curiosity and they're interested in it and now they're researching it. And a lot of times artists will just put their research in these workbooks. And when you look at it, you can kind of follow the process in which, what things they pulled out of their research and then incorporated into their body of work. So you can also see their process. But I believe that when you set kind of an intention like that, that sort of cultivates inspiration and it kind of feeds on itself, and then you feel more creative. So that's just an idea too, is finding a topic that you feel very interested in and that you would love to immerse yourself into. So getting back to my conversation with my friend, he shared with me that he gets these ideas in his head, and then he sort of plays out how he's going to execute these ideas. And then he said that sometimes when he does that process in his head, it almost loses, the inspiration almost loses its energy, its motivation. It almost loses its momentum, right? And he felt like, well, I already figured it out in my head. I executed it in my head. And now I don't even want to do it in reality. In other words, execute it and make it a project and complete it. And that got me thinking about how many times we have a seed of inspiration or an idea in our head that we play out but then it doesn't want to be birthed in reality. It doesn't want to be brought into fruition in physical form. And I thought, you know what? Creativity is fickle like that. And I don't mean fickle in a negative way, but I believe for me, creativity has a life of its own. There are some things that it wants to bring into fruition. And I've had this happen to me, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I believe creativity plants seeds to inspire us. Maybe it was meant to inspire us to take a step to take that class, right? Or to explore watercolor, or to explore, writing a poem, or whatever it is. And that's all the seed was. And it didn't want to go further after that. And what I know from creativity is sometimes it will come on intensely. It gives you an idea, an inspiration, and it doesn't let up. And it haunts you, and it stalks you, and it's asking to be executed and brought into reality. That also happens with creative spirit and creativity. So creativity sometimes will take you down this road, and this is what's interesting, because it goes along the lines of the fact that we are human beings. We are not robots. But there are times where we might go down a road and the inspiration or the creative energy or juice starts to dissipate. And suddenly you're like, not really interested anymore. Can't get motivated to finish this idea. Or now there are times when if you've made a commitment, and you really need to complete it, then you find ways to do that. But what I'm really talking about is recognizing that because we're human and we have different seasons, and we're inspired by one thing one day and not inspired the next day, is part of being human. And yes, we do have to find skills to stay disciplined, to be committed, especially when we make a commitment to someone else that, oh yeah, I'm going to make this artwork for you. You got commissioned to do it, and even though you don't feel like it, you find a way to finish it. Or you made a commitment to write a book or a novel, and now you got to finish it. I think that's a whole other animal and requires a skill to be able to find your way to navigate that. But what I'm really talking about is recognizing that we go in and out of different forms and different levels of creative inspiration. So, that's one of the things that's really interesting, is that because we're human, things shift, seasons change. So getting back to my original thought is there are times that we get a seed of an idea, and there are some creative seeds that are not meant to be birthed, and they are just meant to be a stepping stone towards something else, something bigger, something different. And it's important not to try to hold on so tightly to the original idea, but that you are open to that sort of ebb and flow and the waves shifting back and forth or shifting elsewhere when it comes to creativity. Because I think that creativity is that way. And when I was going to share my experience, one of the reasons why I ended up closing my practice as a therapist is I was working primarily with creative clients. So we would talk a lot about sharing their ideas, a project they were working on, if they were stuck. And I would have all these ideas come up in my head, not only necessarily to help them get past some of the blocks and some of the places they were stuck, but it would inspire sometimes those conversations, like one of the things that I mentioned, the conversations I would have with my clients would begin to inspire and spark ideas and plant seeds in my head in terms of what I wanted to do creatively. And over time, those ideas started to haunt me, meaning they were just constantly knocking on the door, constantly whispering, you got to do this. You got to really just go and create a piece that looks like this, or you need to explore this medium. And that was one of the reasons why I got into mixed media, because mixed media was calling to me. And I know for me, with creative spirit, with inspiration, the muse, the divine spark, it wasn't leaving me alone, and I really needed to do something about it. I kept trying to put a damper on it. Oh, when I get retired, when I get extra time, when, after, my therapy practice is established, whatever excuses I was making for myself, it just wasn't enough to shut that creative voice out, up and leave me alone. It just kept saying, you really need to do this. And that it was one of the inspiration for me to start dabbling in art journaling, because I was so inspired by the mixed media that I was seeing that I wanted to do it for myself. And that's how I started. And that's how creativity works. And I can get all into the subject of how creativity is in our DNA as the purpose of helping us move forward to find, in a way, for us to actualize ourselves, to find our higher purpose, to find out who we are. Creativity is that catalyst. And it is the energy that sometimes ignites us to go down a path and explore. Oh, and trust me, I have explored poetry writing, I have explored dancing, performing, creativity, any creative activity that really inspired me in the time. I would follow it and I would just check it out because it just resonated with me. And I think all those different activities that creative spirit was inspiring me by has also helped me to come to a place now where I really understand how creativity works in my life. So but I'm not gonna I think maybe in another episode I'll talk about my journey. But what I really wanted to share in this episode is that creative inspiration can come from pretty much unexpected places, and it can come from different places. And creative spirit will plant the seed in a variety of ways. And often I think it can inspire us through our life experiences. Even the most painful experience is a gem of creative inspiration. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. Sometimes I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about in these episodes, but I thought that was an interesting topic. And that's another thing too, I guess. It's about trusting divine spark will inspire me to find a topic to talk about in this podcast. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope it gave you some creative inspiration to maybe assess in your life where your inspiration is coming from and where maybe you can get more of it and ignite more of it. So I hope that will help and inspire you as well. So thank you for listening to this podcast. I appreciate all of you who are following me, listening to my podcast, watching my YouTube videos. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. And if you want more information about some of my online courses, go to truecreativitywithin.com and you can check out all the courses I have there. And probably in the next couple of months, I will be opening up my group, Creative Spirit Connection, which is a year-long group that meets once a month. And each month is a lesson that connects creativity with some form of self-care, inner guidance, spirituality. It also it also connects to gaining more self-awareness. In other words, I couple up creativity, a creative practice, or an art practice with a way for personal transformation. So right now my group is closed, but I'll be opening that up in a couple of months. And if you feel like that's something you're interested in, you can go to truecreativitywithin.com and check my page out, and I have more information on that. And also email me if you're interested in possibly joining that group. I do. I'm very selective on who I allow in that group because our group is very cohesive right now. We're in a really good vibration, and I want to make sure that whoever joins is a complement to that. So anyway, you can go to my website to check that out. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please check that out and subscribe and follow me. My podcast is also on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. So until next time, stay creative and stay creatively inspired. Bye.